All right, 6 minutes after 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this, not stormy yet, but it's threatening to be stormy later on, Tuesday. Just a real quick mention, there's a tornado watch in effect until 7 p.m. tonight. I mean, right now it looks pretty calm out there, but the weathermen who I refer to when I say they, are saying that we've got some bad weather coming our way, and it'll probably be with us pretty much from 2 o'clock on. So just be aware of that. Alabama, from the storm system, Alabama has already reported baseball-sized hail. So just so you know.
My.
In the state of Florida, we have a couple of ways of dealing with people who have broken the law. We can incarcerate them, or we can put them on probation. And with juveniles, there's a third option, which is to have some kind of a program called, well, it's like house arrest. The way it's supposed to work is that jail, or in the case of a child, a juvenile, it's a detention center. Jail and detention centers are not supposed to be sentencing facilities. They're supposed to be holding facilities until a sentence has been decided. And quite often, if there is a sentence, then the time spent in jail is taken off of the sentence. And then they're moved, in the adult case, to prisons. In the juvenile case, to, I can't remember what they call them now, secure facilities of some sort. And not always. In the case of children, sometimes it's even into the Ocala National Forest, believe it or not, to do these programs where kids are rehabilitated. And that's another thing in the state of Florida. Juveniles are rehabilitated, adults are penalized. But in this country, we have probably, you might agree, you might disagree, way too many. I think it's way too many people incarcerated for long periods of time because of marijuana. Just seems a little bit outrageous. So we have on the phone a guest who's going to talk about the book. It's titled Decarcerating America, From Mass Punishment to Public Health. Ernest Drucker is the editor of the book. He's a professor of public health at New York University's College of Global Public Health, the founder of the International Harm Reduction Association, and the founding editor of the Harm Reduction Journal. Let's find out about the book, Decarcerating America. Ernest Drucker, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Where are you right now?
I used to live in Orlando.
Did you? Okay. Why are you're listed as an editor? What does that mean? There's lots of contributors to the book?
Exactly. It's an anthology of 14 articles by experts in each of these areas, including a U.S. federal judge, public defenders, former prosecutors, former prisoners. Very, very broad array of people talking about different aspects of the issue from a public health perspective, which is related to prevention. And we want to prevent people going to prison as much. We want to, when they're in prison, we want to prevent it being a traumatic experience, let it perhaps be a rehabilitative one. And then after release from prison, almost 700,000 people are released from prison each year, but they're often released with so many restrictions, and they're incapacitated economically and socially, as well as the stigma that goes with being a former prisoner. And there needs to be a lot of work done on that, which means mental health services in the community.
Is there
drug treatment services?
Is there a crime? Is there a consensus about certain crimes that are over sentenced? Maybe too many years for marijuana, for example. That's a common one, I guess.
Yes, the engine that led to the mass incarceration was the war on drugs and the sentencing, the mandatory sentencing that went with it, and that's begun to abate. But there's so many people who have been in the system. We have 70 million Americans who have a criminal record at this point.
So I mentioned in the intro the little bit I know, and I only know a tiny little bit. In the state of Florida, the juvenile philosophy is to rehabilitate. The adult philosophy is to penalize.
Yes, it is, but the institutions, even though that technically is their mission to rehabilitate with juveniles, the institutions themselves have the same problems that institutions always have. You get people working in them who don't know what they're doing. They get brutal,
right?
Jail is a jail. And there's a wonderful book called "Burning Down the House" by Nell Bernstein, who wrote the first book about the children of prisoners called Alone in the World about 10 years ago, and this is a sequel to it, and it's that David Byrne's song about burning down the house.
Right.
The idea is that the institutions are irredeemable, because locking a bunch of kids up who have been involved in trouble and crime together, it inevitably turns into a punitive enterprise.
Well, and
the kids don't help each other.
And again, in our state anyway, and I know this because I worked in that system for 7 years. You
know better than I do then.
But it's been a long time, so I don't know what's changed. But what I wanted to say is
the world hasn't changed.
My observation was this. What you're saying is exactly right, at least for juveniles, because that's all I know. But the programs that looked like adult prisons felt like adult prisons, and you're right, they weren't as skilled, I guess you might say, at rehabilitating. They were basically there because these kids were like the worst of the worst, if you want to be the honest. That's the honest answer there. But the kids who got real rehabilitation were on like programs, like farm programs, where they had to do physical labor, not to the extent of like the old Laurel and Hardy movies, but where they would be, setting up their own tents and learning how to make their own food and fire and things like that.
Right.
I used to ask, does this really work? And I was told so many times that it did. And in fact, I met some of the kids who went through the program, and they were changed. So
yeah, I mean, I think the kids are very open to being rescued from this thing. Often they've when they were young and there were guns around, they shot someone, and that should that determine the rest of their life?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an argument right there. But I mean, is there a clear-cut group of prisoners right now who we should maybe take a second look at?
Yes, another one besides kids is the elderly. There's a chapter in there by the group called Release Aging Prisoners Programs, because there is no group that has a lower probability of committing a crime after prison than the elderly. Their age is a huge variable in this, and there's programs now to try to get that. They cost a fortune, by the way, because they need medical care. A lot of medical care. Medical care costs about 4 times as much in prison as it does outside for various reasons.
You say that New Jersey forgoes putting people in jail because they can't afford bail. Isn't that going to just encourage them to do another crime?
Well, because they can't make bail, they go to jail.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean.
That's what bail is about. Bail is about you've been arrested for something, you haven't been convicted yet, and while awaiting determination of trial.
Oh, I see. I apologize.
Like Rikers, the notorious Rikers Island in New York is the.
I got it backwards because of my wording and my interpretation. I apologize.
Do any of the contributors to the book disagree with one another?
No, I think the attitude is that mass incarceration is bad and we should have less of it.
What is the statistics? I've always heard that we have more prisoners than any other country. Is that right?
More prisoners, a higher rate of prisoners than any other country, and a higher rate than we've ever had in our history. For almost 100 years, the prison rate was maybe 100 per 100,000, and now it's 700 per 100,000. It's the highest rate in the world. We have more people in solitary than other countries have in their entire prison system.
Really?
The use of solitary, even though there's been a lot of pressure to cut it down, it's a system that's very hard to control from outside. It's not open.
We had a case here. We had a case here in Florida. It was the 3 strikes you're out, or whatever it's called, where if a gun, and the third strike for a woman up in Jacksonville was she shot into the ceiling to scare somebody away. And that was, and she got put in prison for a long time. I think they finally figured out to let her out, but she was sentenced. I think she was sentenced to life. But some smart lawyer
on a first offense.
No. She had 2 others, but the third one she was defending herself and didn't even fire at anybody. She fired into the ceiling. Yeah, I don't remember the whole story, but I remember she was locked up, and there were a lot of people trying to figure out a way to get her out, and I think they did succeed at that. So what is your conclusion? What do you think is the general consensus of what we should be doing?
Well, the first priority is to reduce the mandatory long sentences that go with drugs, because they account for a huge portion of the existence of mass incarceration, the war on drugs. Have you seen a movie called The 13th?
No.
You want to look at that movie. It's by that woman who made Selma. Wonderful film.
Oh, okay.
And in it, there's a scene where remember Alderman and Haldeman and Ehrlichman?
Right.
There's a scene where they're talking about going after the drugs associated with the Black population and the Black Panthers. They want to discredit all these revolutionaries, and they can do it easily around drugs. And that's one of the things that made the punitive drug laws so popular.
And drugs can be planted.
Kind of politician.
Yeah.
And drugs can be planted, right.
A fascinating topic, and it's really a serious one. I'm glad you are tackling this one and got a lot of people on your side to do that. I have a copy of the book, Decarcerating America, if you would like to...
Let me mention there's a website
Go ahead.
that people can look at right now, decarceration.org.
Decarceration.org. I found the book on Amazon, and of course decarceration.org as well. Thank you for doing
And
this.
it has synopses of each of the chapters and pieces by and organizations that are working in this area. It's a good resource.
Okay.
And has very nice graphics. I recommend it. Okay.
Ernest, thank you for being on the air, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to be in touch with you guys later. Bye-bye.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Okay.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Tuesday, plenty of clouds, breezy, warm, and humid. A couple of thunderstorms will cross the area this afternoon, some of which can be severe. There's the risk for flooding downpours, large hail, and damaging wind gusts with highs in the upper 70s to mid 80s. Clearing later Tuesday.